The Call of Duty community can rarely agree on anything except one thing. No one likes skill-based matchmaking, aka SBMM. In this video, I want to help educate and clarify a lot of misconceptions about SBMM because many people really don't understand how it works, and that will also include discussing how SBMM can be manipulated to get easier lobbies, aka bot lobbies. So first, Call of Duty's skill-based matchmaking system is a bit unique because it uses something additional called engagement optimized matchmaking, or EOMM, which adjusts the SBMM in a way to keep you playing longer. So for example, how many times have you booted up Warzone, in your first game on, you have a pretty decent game, and you get more kills than you normally would on average. But after that, maybe the next 3 to 5 games, you're struggling. The games feel sweaty, or where all the enemy players seem just as good, if not better than you. And after you've been playing for maybe an hour or two, you're thinking, I might get off the game. And then bam, you have that great game where you drop a bunch of kills, you maybe get a win, and it seems like all of a sudden you're the best person in the lobby, and now you want to keep playing again. Problem is, you know what happens next, because the next game, you're gonna be back in the blender, struggling just to get a few kills, and the cycle keeps repeating itself. And EOMM actually will learn what your breaking point is, and it knows when you're about to typically quit, and just before then, it's gonna give you that good game to hook you to keep playing. Essentially, engagement optimized matchmaking is intentionally sprinkling in easier games for you every now and then so that you keep chasing that feeling of a high kill game or getting a win. And to make matters worse, there's no way of really knowing if you're getting better or how hard a particular lobby was. See, back in Warzone 1, the API was public. This just means that all the stats were publicly accessible, and websites like COD Tracker, Warzone Stats could show you the average KD of the lobby that you were just in, where it would read the kill death ratio of every player in your game and then give you an average so you knew how hard that lobby was on average. Most beginners or lower skilled players would often have average KD lobbies of less than 1, even as low as 0.5 KD lobbies, whereas the veterans, higher skilled players, or sweats basically never saw average lobbies under 1. I remember even a few times myself being in Rebirth Island lobbies with an average KD above 2. But currently the API is not public. Instead, it's hidden or private, and it's been like that since Warzone 1 shut down. So gauging how sweaty a lobby is more of a feel factor, and it can't be quantified unless you use an app that unfortunately many top ranked players use to lobby surf until they find a lower KD, and this app is technically illegal, I guess. Before I explain that though, I want to address, if everyone hates skill-based matchmaking, why does Call of Duty even have it? Well, based on recent info that Activision and Call of Duty published, SBMM actually benefits about 90% of the player base. You see, Call of Duty ran a test where they loosened SBMM, aka made lobbies easier or less sweaty. And only the top 10% of players saw this as a positive thing because they played more than average, likely because they got to play against more average level players and they did better than they normally would and had more fun, so they kept playing. Whereas the other bottom 90% of players played less, probably because with the looser SBMM, they were playing against higher skilled players than they were normally used to, and they played worse than their average and had less fun. And when you look at the bottom 30% of players based on skill rating, those players played much less, with low skilled players being a huge chunk of the player base and potential money makers for Call of Duty. SBMM is intended to protect those lower skilled players so they keep playing the most. The side effect of this though is that the top 10% of players, aka the sweats, are punished and kept to fighting only each other. Now the goal is not to punish the top 10%, but just to satisfy the majority of the players. Now this isn't a brag or anything, but based off my stats, I'm clearly in the top 10% skill bucket and probably top 1% based off stats that JGod published of average KD ratios in Warzone. Actually, being above a 2 KD is a top 3% player in all of Warzone just based off KD ratios. And anything above a 1.5 KD, and you're probably in that top 10% bucket of players, and you're being punished the most by SBMM. Although there are other factors that go into your SBMM besides just your KD ratio, but it's a pretty good estimate. And when Call of Duty tested the opposite thing by making SBMM stricter, aka sweatier lobbies, you saw a similar result, but in an inverse fashion. The top 10%, aka the sweats, they quit much more often, whereas the bottom 80%, especially the bottom 20%, played much more. And that's because the bottom 20% of players were likely the most protected by SBMM, and they could only play against the other bottom 20%, which led them to playing much better than they normally would and then having more fun. Okay, let's get back to that app that people are using for lobby surfing. Outside of ranked, this app is also commonly used for nuke run services where people will carry players to get the nuke rewards because dropping a nuke in a sweaty lobby is pretty hard to do. Now, I'm not even gonna say the name of this app because I don't want to promote it. From my understanding, the only way to get access to it now is through an invite-only private Discord. But just having the app is a bannable offense because it reads the game's memory, which is how most cheats work, like aimbot or wall hacks, etc. Also, this app is a bit different than how Warzone 1 API worked because it can tell you the lobby KD the moment you connect in the pregame lobby, like before you even load into the match, allowing you to back out and re-queue until you find a lobby you like with a lower average KD. Whereas the public API back in Warzone 1, it was usually like 10 to 15 minutes behind, so you would have to finish your game until you knew what that average lobby KD was, and this prevented you from lobby surfing. Now, I'm not saying all of the top ranked players are using this, but I do know many are. And unfortunately, a decent amount of top 250 players are blatantly cheating because, well, anti-cheat is just not very good at all. Which is why personally, I usually hit iridescent each season and then I stop playing. Because one, the amount of blatant cheaters in the iridescent ranks and above are insane. And you can lose a ton of SR if you run into one of those blatant cheaters. And one of the only best way to avoid them is to use that lobby surfing app, which I'm obviously not gonna do. Now, huge kudos to the legit people that are actually in the top 250. A rough way of knowing who is legit in the top 250 is if they attended the World Series of Warzone LAN event that wasn't too long ago, and especially if they placed well, they're legit. With how bad the cheating situation is in ranked, many of the top 250 players that would be top 250, they just don't even bother playing it because it's not worth their time with how much lack of competitive integrity there is. I also want to add, even if ranked was perfect and did have competitive integrity, I'm not even sure I can make it to the top 250. I know I'm very good at this game, but I am definitely not the best, so this is not me trying to make excuses for why I'm not a top 250 player. That is honestly just a skill issue on my part. Okay, but what about regular public lobbies or pubs? If you've been playing Warzone recently, you probably agree that in the past month or so, this is the most cranked up SBMM has been. Every lobby feels like you have to snort a few scoops of pre-workout just to do halfway decent, and personally, some of my pub lobbies feel the same or worse as ranked. Recently, I've noticed almost every single Resurgence quads game I play, especially on Rebirth, has at least 1 to 2 iridescent ranked teams in it. I know this either by them wearing the iridescent ranked operator or using the calling card to signifying that they've hit iridescent previously. And being iridescent means that you are at least a top 1% player, since only 1% of ranked players reach iridescent. Now, cranked SBMM wouldn't be as big of a deal if we at least had Resurgence solos, because I actually kind of enjoy sweaty solo games. But that's because it's just a 1v1 versus potentially a 1v4 with the quads playlist. And the playlist currently is not so good, with only 4 core modes of BR solos and quads, and then Resurgence duos and quads. I pretty much only play Resurgence, I just don't like Urzikstan very much. And I'm not a fan of duos because the games die out so quickly, so I'm stuck with quads, where most teams have resorted to treating it like ranked because that's just what you have to do if you want to do well in these lobbies with the way SBMM is. I'm assuming the cranked SBMM is because player counts are at an all-time low, with people waiting for Black Ops 6, school back in session, and also just the lack of new content and variety that Warzone has seen over the last few months. And with its lower player count, it's usually the more casual, less sweaty players that are the first to stop playing, and the more hardcore, sweaty players who keep playing, which makes the SBMM problem feel even worse than it already is. Okay, so what are people doing to loosen SBMM though? There's 3 main methods that I will explain. The most common, and you're probably already heard of this one, is VPNing. But gaming VPNs don't work like a normal VPN. A normal VPN would actually change your computer's location and basically trick the internet to thinking you're somewhere else. If you use this and you try to play Call of Duty, you would connect to servers closest to where you VPN. So let's say I VPN to India, which is across the world for me. My connection or latency is going to be insanely high and the game would be nearly unplayable. But gaming VPNs only trick the game enough to send some of your data to that location, but still allow you to connect to a server closest to where you physically are, keeping your latency relatively normal and low. The theory behind this is that the gaming servers get confused and just throw you into whatever lobby is closest to you, instead of being able to find an appropriately ranked lobby, since per Activision, ping is king and is supposed to be the top top priority for matchmaking. Problem is, gaming VPNs don't work that well currently in Warzone. Maybe the devs know this and have done things to make them not work, and actually in my own experience, I often find that they make the lobbies worse and sweatier. And when some of my more casual friends try to use them, they just say they don't really notice anything at all. So I don't use them very often personally, and I just find that playing at non-peak times like the morning or early afternoon during the weekdays are much better than trying to VPN if you want to loosen SBMM. The second method is probably the least popular, but it's been around the longest, basically since the dawn of Call of Duty multiplayer, and that's reverse boosting. This involves taking the account you play on and intentionally doing really bad on it. I've even caught full teams of people doing this in multiplayer shipment where they're max level accounts, but they're going in and just repeatedly blowing themselves up with RPGs or grenades or whatever. And after doing this enough, maybe a few games in a row, the SBMM algorithm thinks you're really struggling, that you need a break from those sweaty lobbies, which will then put you in a lower skilled lobby. This is often how many multiplayer content creators drop absurdly high kill games or drop nukes with off meta weapons. And I'm by no means saying that every single nuke dropped was because of reverse boosting, that's just not true. But the chances of a world record gameplay happening in a sweaty, high skilled lobby is basically zero. These things really only happen when a high skilled player gets into a lower skilled lobby, either because of a rare chance or something is being done to manipulate lobbies. The term reverse boosting, though, has been getting thrown around a lot lately, and I find it's probably the most incorrectly used term. It's often confused with the third method that we'll discuss here shortly, although these two things are very different. Now, personally, I've never reverse boosted because there's no way I have the patience to do it, and it's also way more prevalent in multiplayer than Warzone, and I'm just not a big multiplayer person. Now, the final method is a bit harder to do, but probably the most consistent at actually lowering SBMM, and that's called two-boxing. To my understanding, this method has actually been around for a long time, reportedly all the way since like Black Ops 3, so pre-Warzone. However, it's gotten very popular lately because many streamers and content creators have been doing it to combat SBMM, and some of them, like myself, are open about it and show their audience that they're doing it. Whereas others, unfortunately, will hide this and act like they just happen to be getting into great lobbies, or that they're just so amazing that they can drop 30 to 40 plus kill games regularly because of their skill. The ironic thing about this is that despite being open and honest, I've caught a decent amount of hate for this. Now, I easily could have hit it by just like hiding my screen while I queue for a lobby when I'm streaming, and probably caught way less flack for it, but apparently being truthful is bad nowadays. I even had 2 lovely videos made about me from the truthful, honest, and charming hacker hunter community. By the way, in case you didn't catch that, those adjectives were meant to be sarcastic. And these hacker hunters claim that people like me were caught and exposed for doing this, but I'm unsure how you can be caught and exposed for something that you were upfront about since the beginning. But what is two-boxing and how does it work? It's actually pretty simple, but it requires either a second console or PC account. And as far as I understand, it doesn't really matter which one you use. You just need to make a second account, and that second account is going to be viewed by the SBMM algorithm as a new account that shouldn't be placed in high-skilled sweaty lobbies. So the second brand new account will host and queue into the lobby with your main account, and then once you're in the pre-game, you just back out the second account or the two-box account, and then you can play solo versus duos, solo versus trios, or solo versus quads on the main account. So obviously you cannot two-box in solos, and you couldn't in ranked either once your main account is beyond like gold rank or higher, because you can't party up with people that are too far apart in ranked. Some people will also go in and then reverse boost the two-box account, and they'll die a bunch of times and try to make it an even lower SBMM bracket. It seems like the SBMM algorithm tries to find a balance between the members and the party. So hypothetically, if you have an account that is in the bottom skill bucket paired with an account in the top skill bucket, you'd expect to land somewhere in the middle and actually find what is truly the average Warzone lobby. However, this hypothetical of how SBMM party mechanics functions isn't that straightforward. And if anything, instead of coming to the middle, it actually tends to lean towards the higher SBMM rating of that person in the party. So for example, if I try to play with some of my friends that are more casual players, let's say around 1 KD or even a little bit less, the lobbies usually feel just as sweaty for me, but my friends have a horrible time and they complain constantly at how sweaty my lobbies are. And this party-based SBMM mechanic seems to have gotten more strict since Warzone 3, and it's a big reason why I'm forced to mostly play by myself. Because on the flip side, when I play with a full group of higher skilled players, let's say other streamer friends, the SBMM is dialed to the max every game, and unless you're playing together and treating it like ranked, it's just not that fun. The ironic thing is that I actually have not broken my all-time PR PR of 53 kills since I began 2boxing, which for transparency has been probably at least about a month and a half or so. Although I do find it much easier to drop 20+ kill gameplays and usually can get some 30s and maybe 40s every once in a while as well. The interesting thing about my all-time PR of 53 is that it actually involved none of these methods, no VPN, 2box, or reverse boost. I was playing with some friends, aka the mod squad, who at the time were lower skilled players like 0.7 to 0.9 KDs. Although technically speaking, that's actually an average KD in Warzone. The average KD is about a 0.85. And we just happened to get into a lower skilled lobby, aka a bot lobby, that I popped off in and really took advantage of. And to their credit, my friends also really helped me a lot of the end game because they just stopped shooting people altogether and they were just kind of popping UAVs for me because they knew I had a chance at breaking a crazy PR. And so I will admit my PR is a little bit skewed because of that. But the point of this is saying that these insanely high kill gameplays or PRs, they can happen in normal lobbies, it's just the chances are a lot less. And with so many people 2boxing right now, even if you do well in a non-2box lobby, the comments and chat is filled with people saying that I'm a bot or I'm cheating, etc., etc. For example, the other day I dropped a 33 and a 37 kill gameplay within about 2 hours of each other. That was a regular non-VPN, non-reverse boost, non-2box lobby. But people were commenting saying that I'm a POS and that I wouldn't stand a chance in their lobbies. And I kind of just chuckle at these comments, but I do understand the frustration since unfortunately many other people aren't honest about this and everyone feels like SBMM is what's holding them back from greatness. One thing I want to add though is that what you consider a sweaty lobby may not be a sweaty lobby to someone else. So for example, when we do community games where my viewers play with me, who are mostly average skill level players, I get a lot of complaints from them that my lobbies are filled with cheaters or they're ultra sweaty, but to me it just feels like a typical game or maybe even a little bit of a good lobby because I'm playing with lower KD players than I'm used to on my team. For me personally, what I've been doing lately is we'll usually play at least like the first hour of stream without 2boxing. And then if the lobbies are feeling super sweaty, which more recently since about season 6, they definitely have been, we'll throw on the 2box and just have some fun. People in my stream have enjoyed it because simply speaking, watching high kill games in solo versus trios or solo versus quads, it's just more exciting than watching me struggle and get stacked on by full iridescent teams and pubs until finally SBMM loosens a bit and I'll get a decent gameplay. And this is also where content creation and streaming has played such a large role in SBMM. For myself, one of my bread and butter videos I do is just a loadout video, which is one of the most common videos for Warzone content. And I'll explain why the loadout's good, and I'll show off some gameplays with that gun. If it is a meta gun or a top tier option, which there's usually only a few in the game at each time because Warzone 3 has been kind of lopsided in terms of its meta, we can usually get a few good gameplays, maybe a few 20s, maybe a 30 after maybe 3 or 4 hours of playing without having the 2box. But if it's a non-meta weapon, maybe even like an MW2 gun, it's nearly impossible to get good games with it and to be able to show them off. But if I 2box, I can easily get these high kill gameplays in much less time and also drop higher kill games like 30s and maybe 40s. The honest truth is that people that are consistently posting 30 to 40+ kill games are probably 2boxing. I'm not saying everyone is. Some people are just really that good and some people play a lot, giving them more chances to get those games, especially if they play at off-peak times. One thing that used to really frustrate me though was people saying things like, oh, you usually only can drop like a 20 or maybe 30 kill games on your videos, but insert other YouTuber here, they drop 30 to 40 kill games consistently. So you must not be as good as them. And the reason for that comment is simple. It's because the majority of people just can't tell the difference between what a sweaty higher skilled lobby is versus a lower skilled one, aka a bot lobby. To many average players, if someone hits a side cancel and maybe hits most of their shots, that player must be a giga sweat demon when in reality they might only be a slightly above average player. The same concept holds true to why higher skilled players are often accused of and reported for cheating by lower skilled players, because those players aren't used to seeing what a high skilled player is capable of, since SBMM often protects those players and they never play against higher skilled players. And to make matters worse, with Call of Duty's lackluster anti-cheat and its very strong aim assist, it can be very difficult to discern who's legit and who's cheating, even for experienced players. So at the end of the day, it's a situation of you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you're legit and never 2box or lobby manipulate, but you drop high kill games, you'll get accused of doing it. And on average, you probably won't drop as high kill of games as other content creators, so the average viewer just thinks you're not as good as them. But if you do 2box and you're honest about it, that average viewer now thinks you're only good because of the 2boxing, and then they go watch another content creator who might be 2boxing but they hide it and that viewer doesn't know. And this creates a culture amongst content creators where the norm is to 2-box and manipulate lobbies, but hide that you're doing it. To add to this, some of the most ironic things I've heard since I've been publicly talking about 2-boxing is that people will say, TCap, I tried 2-boxing, I reverse boosted the second account, but my lobbies are still sweaty. Why is that? And I ask, well, what is your current PR and what's your KD? And it's usually something like, my PR is a 1.2 and I have a KD or a PR of, let's say, 18. And my response is, not to be mean, but you still have to be pretty good to drop these very high kill games, even in lower skilled lobbies. Dropping 40 plus, even in a bot lobby, is really hard to do, and probably less than 1% of players can do this, because besides just having to kill 40 players and win 40 gunfights, you have to find that many people within a match, and that requires fast pacing, the ability to act off information quickly, and there's also just a component of luck involved, which requires the lobby to stay healthy and many other factors. But on the flip side, I've also had plenty of people be like, TCap, I tried 2-boxing and I broke my PR and I have been having so much fun. And my response is, let's go. That's awesome, dude. I'm glad you're having fun. So if you have an extra console laying around, go for it. If you're wondering though, can I get in trouble for 2-boxing? Is this considered cheating? Well, the only thing that Call of Duty states on their website that is somewhat related to this is what's called boosting. They state any user who colludes with another user to exploit the game for the purpose of gaining XP, prestige, game score, weapon level, or an in-game unlock is subject to penalty. The statement is generally in relation to people, so plural people, not just one person, helping one another level up, like do camo challenges or even gain SR in ranked, as many people have been banned for ranked boosting. But no one has ever been banned or even warned about 2-boxing because 1, it would be incredibly hard to monitor, and 2, it would be like banning someone for intentionally playing with their low skill friends. For example, if my wife played with me, and no offense to her, but I think she's only gotten maybe a handful of kills ever in her time of playing Warzone, we would get the same lobbies with her that I would if I were 2-boxing. So 2-boxing is technically a gray area, but I can almost guarantee you, you're not gonna get in trouble for it. And if Activision did have a huge problem with it, they probably would have put a statement on it or directly warned large content creators that do it. There's 2 final things I want to talk about. A lot of people know me for doing educational Warzone content about how to get better at the game. One thing I can say is that I've never done an educational video breaking down how to get better in a 2-box lobby. Although yes, there still would be plenty of things that you could learn from it. I just don't like the idea of educating people in a lower skilled lobby because it's unrealistic. Although ironically, when I am 2-boxing, I actually run into way more people that recognize me in game, which tells me a lot of my fan base is probably the more average level players. And those lobbies that I play in when I 2-box are the lobbies a lot of my fans play in on a regular basis, just based off their skill level. And that makes perfect sense really, because if remember from before, if the SBMM algorithm is averaging out my main account with a 2-box account, and even slightly favoring towards that main account. So we should end up in average to slightly above average SBMM lobbies. So lastly, I want to ask you guys a question, and I'll probably put a poll up on YouTube for this maybe as well, but please comment your response to this below. I totally understand that there will be people who, even though I'm being open and honest, will still disapprove of 2-boxing, and I get that, and I respect that. If you're just learning this about me and you've watched this whole video through and you want to give me the finger and never watch again or unsubscribe, that's fine. You have the absolute right to do so, but I warn you, be careful on who you go watch instead. The response is often something like, well, it's not fair to those lower skilled players. It's like LeBron playing in a rec league, which first of all, I love being compared to LeBron, although I am certainly not the LeBron James of Call of Duty. I understand that argument though, but this isn't the NBA. It's me wanting to play a video game for fun and make fun videos about it. And I don't think one person being in a lower skill lobby ruins that whole experience for those players. Because personally, I remember being a little kid and playing Call of Duty, and whenever someone else was just destroying me and was at the top of the leaderboard, I wanted to add them and be like them. So the question is, what do you guys think is the right thing to do? Should I never 2-box again or do anything to manipulate lobbies and just work hard at getting the best gameplays and content I can, even though if it's lower kills than what other content creators are posting? Or 2-box, but continue to be open about it and never hide it, which is what I've been doing. In a perfect world, I honestly wish the need to manipulate SBMM wasn't even a thing, and that SBMM was there to only protect the really low skilled players, but not be so strict that the core fans of Call of Duty, like myself, are being punished by and manipulated by this engagement optimized matchmaking. I'd also love for a public API, that way we could just look up and see the lobby strength of everyone and know which people are hiding stuff and which aren't. If you watched all the way through, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this informative and that you can appreciate the honesty, and please feel free to leave a comment below with your thoughts on SBMM. We'll see you in the next one.